Imagine you're walking down the street when suddenly a strange sensation takes over your body. The silence seems heavy, your heart races, and then a voice emerges. A voice that doesn't come from anyone around you, but speaks directly to your inner self, ordering, "Stop now." You obey, without understanding why, and in the next instant, you realize that something terrible would have happened if you had taken just one more step. Now, imagine facing death, trapped in a speeding car, or about to make a fatal decision, when a firm, unfamiliar voice tells you exactly what to do to survive. Is it just a figment of your imagination, a reflection of fear? Or is it the silent presence of a protective spirit watching over you, even when you thought you were alone? These true stories reveal something mysterious and deeply moving. When everything seems lost, when life hangs by a thread, invisible forces can guide us in the most decisive moment of our existence. Life was ordinary for each of these characters. Simple routines, structured families, dreams that seemed distant but possible. They were ordinary people, like you and me, walking the streets, going to work, living amidst joys and hardships. Nothing suggested that one day they would become protagonists of such extraordinary stories, capable of moving and transforming. In the silence of their homes, there was faith, but also doubt. There was hope, but also fear. Some believed the future would hold better days, others clung to the present with all their might, but all, without exception, believed they were alone in the face of life's great trials. And as is common in our existence, there was a mixture of the human and the divine. The father who left early to provide for his family, the mother who juggled work and caring for her children, the young people who dreamed of conquering their place in the world. Seemingly ordinary lives, marked by small daily struggles that, added together, represented true battles. It's easy, when we're immersed in routine, to believe it's just us against the world. Easy to think our terrors are lost in the void, our cries for help are drowned out in the silence of the night. But the truth is, we're not alone. The Gospel according to Spiritism tenderly reminds us, God does not abandon any of his children, and the good spirits are those sent by his providence to console and guide us. It is precisely in these moments, when the pain seems unbearable, or danger threatens us unexpectedly, that the invisible makes itself heard. Many of these characters weren't seeking miracles, nor did they expect to hear voices from beyond. They simply lived, but it was in the simple act of living that they encountered the intervention of the unexpected. Consider, for example, a young man returning from work, exhausted after a full day of exertion. His eyes were heavy, the road seemed endless, and for a moment, his consciousness nearly faded. A second of carelessness was all it took for the worst to happen. Then, amid the silence of the car, a firm voice echoed in his mind, "Wake up now." He jolted awake, and in that brief moment, he saved not only his own life but also the lives of everyone who might cross his path. In another home, a mother walked absent-mindedly with her 5-year-old daughter. It was an ordinary afternoon, like so many others. The girl's laughter filled the air, until, just as she was about to cross the street, a clear voice whispered in her ear, "Stop now." Instinctively, she held her daughter tightly. In that same second, a speeding car passed in front of them. One more step, and perhaps they wouldn't be there to tell. These stories weren't born of grandiose visions or spectacular apparitions. They were born of the everyday, of the unexpected, of the invisible that reveals itself subtly but powerfully. And that's precisely where the mystery lies. Why do these voices emerge at certain times? Who sends them? How can they be so present when we need them most? Perhaps you, watching now, have also felt something similar. An inexplicable premonition, an intuition too strong to ignore, an impulse that steered you away from danger. We call it instinct, chance, coincidence. But deep down, couldn't it be the same divine care that guided those characters? These experiences invite us to reflect. We are not here by chance. There is an invisible network of love and protection that extends over each of us. And when everything seems to fall apart, when we believe we are alone, a voice arises, not to deceive us, but to awaken us. These characters, like us, carried doubts. There were nights when they wondered, does God hear me? Does He care about me? But it only took a moment of danger, a single second, for them to realize they had never been alone. And the most surprising thing is that, in many cases, it wasn't just about being saved from death. These experiences transformed them from within. After hearing these voices, nothing seemed ordinary anymore. It was as if the veil had been torn away and a new spiritual and profound reality had been revealed before their eyes. That's why, with each account, the feeling isn't just of fear or relief, but of purpose. Every voice heard, every life spared, every tear shed in the moment of fright, everything seemed to carry a greater meaning, something beyond human comprehension. And here's the point that connects all these stories. It doesn't matter if you believe a lot, a little, or almost nothing. It doesn't matter if you consider yourself strong or fragile. The truth is that the spiritual world is closer to us than we imagine. It manifests itself not only in temples or in prayers, but also in alleys, on roads, in the simplest homes. These voices, coming from the invisible, are not just warnings of danger. They are reminders that we are supported, loved, and guided. They are silent proof that our lives have value, that our existence is not the result of chance. And perhaps, as you hear these stories, you'll remember something you've also experienced. A voice, a sign, an intuition that changed the course of your life. If this has happened to you, know that it wasn't imagination. It was care. It was love. It was divine providence. And it is precisely from here that our journey deepens. Because what seemed to be mere coincidence will soon reveal the power of spirituality in its purest form. Get ready, because the next stories will make you feel, get emotional, and ask yourself, what if that voice you once heard was also the whisper of a protective spirit trying to save you? The first story took place on a dark road in rural Brazil. The night was heavy, the fog spread like a blanket, covering every curve and every patch of asphalt. A young driver was driving alone, returning home after a long day of work. His eyes were already heavy, his mind was tired, and his body was begging for rest. Little by little, he began to lose his fight against sleep. The steering wheel slipped slightly in his hands, and the road, once so clear, became an almost hypnotic blur. Then, just as the vehicle leaned dangerously off the road, a firm, clear voice echoed in his mind, "Wake up now." He woke with a start, his trembling hands gripping the steering wheel with all his remaining strength. His heart raced as if it were about to leap out of his chest, and a mixture of dread and relief coursed through him. One more second, and it might be the end. In that instant, the young man knew that something much bigger than himself had happened. In another setting, far away, a mother walked hand in hand with her young daughter. It was an ordinary, seemingly peaceful afternoon, and the two continued to laugh together, distracted by the simple conversations of childhood. But as they approached a crosswalk, a clear voice, almost like a firm whisper, echoed within her. "Stop now," without thinking, instinctively. She grabbed her daughter's arm and stopped in her tracks. In the same second, a speeding car passed in front of them, tearing through the air with a deafening roar. Had they moved just a few inches ahead, mother and daughter would have become just another number in the cold statistics of traffic violence. The silence that followed was different. It was as if time had stopped. The mother, trembling, hugged her daughter tightly, knowing it hadn't been just a coincidence. Because the voice hadn't seemed a figment of her imagination. It had been real, clear, and had appeared just as life was about to be lost. These are just two among many accounts. Stories that have something in common. The initial shock, the doubt that invades the mind immediately after the event. Have I gone crazy? Did I imagine it? Is the first natural reaction. But little by little, reason gives way to certainty. No, it couldn't have been just a stray thought, nor a reflection of fear. It had been real. These are moments when the invisible becomes palpable, when the spiritual breaks through the barriers of logic and reason to manifest itself clearly, directly, and often life-savingly. And the more we hear stories like these, the more we notice a pattern. At the moment when danger reaches its limit, when life seems to hang by a thread, voices emerge. Strong, clear, unquestionable. They don't ask permission, they don't introduce themselves, they don't explain, they simply make themselves heard at the exact moment they need to be heard. Many describe the experience as something impossible to ignore. It's not a vague thought, not a simple intuition. It's a direct, firm command that overrides any other idea, and curiously, it's always accompanied by an indescribable sensation that someone was nearby, someone larger, someone invisible. And perhaps that's the most intriguing part. These people weren't experienced mediums, they weren't seeking spiritual contact, and they weren't in prayer when they heard the message. They were ordinary people, going about their daily lives, distracted by the hustle and bustle of life. But when danger approached, intervention came. Are these warnings the work of our most primal instincts? Or are they signs of a constant, silent, and loving spiritual care? Spiritism reminds us that each of us possesses a protective spirit, a guide who accompanies us from birth to our final moments. It doesn't make decisions for us, it doesn't interfere with our free will, but it guides us in times of greatest need. And perhaps these stories are proof of this invisible care. How many times in your own life have you felt that inexplicable urge to stop, to change paths, to postpone a plan? How many times have you listened to an inner voice that you later realized saved you from something worse? Is it really just a coincidence? These characters, who lived through such intense experiences, also asked themselves these questions. But the more they reflected, the more they understood that the answer was beyond chance. That's why each new story brings us closer to this greater truth. We are not alone, and even when we believe no one is listening, that our prayers are lost in the void, there are invisible forces working on our behalf. And the most surprising thing is that these signs didn't stop there. More and more, these voices began to recur, appearing in different circumstances, in different places, with people who had never met, but who shared the experience of hearing the call of the invisible. And it is precisely at this point that our story deepens. Because if these first two accounts are already capable of chilling, the following ones reveal even more of the mystery and power of spiritual presence. Accounts in which destiny seemed already sealed, until a simple phrase, coming from nowhere, changed everything. Get ready, because what you're about to hear next could transform the way you view life, death, and the constant care we receive from the spiritual world. The most striking of all accounts came from an ordinary man, living the routine of any working man. It was a morning seemingly like any other. He was late, worried about appointments, and rushed through the hallways of a busy building, trying to make up for lost time. Arriving at the elevator, he hurriedly pressed the button and waited. The metallic sound of gears announced that the car was on its way. The man took a deep breath, adjusted his briefcase, and prepared to enter. But the moment the door opened before him, a firm, clear, and unmistakable voice echoed in his mind. "Don't come in." He froze. His heart raced, his hands sweating. He looked around, searching for someone, but the hallway was empty. There was no one there. The call had been direct, as if spoken in his ear, but at the same time, without a mouth, without a face, without a visible presence. For a brief second, he thought he was going crazy, that his mind, overcome with fatigue, had played a trick on him. But something stronger, instinctive, prevented him from taking a step forward. He hesitated, stepped back, and the elevator door slowly closed before his eyes. Seconds later, a deafening crash echoed through the building. The elevator, packed with people, had plummeted. The blaring of sirens, cries for help, and the ensuing chaos filled the room. People were seriously injured. Some would never return home. And that man who should have been among them, was alive, standing in the hallway, pale, trembling, in shock, but alive. What had stopped him from entering that elevator? How could he explain the voice he'd heard, so clear, so urgent, ordering him to step back? He had no doubt, if he'd ignored that warning, he wouldn't be there anymore. These moments reveal something that human reason can hardly comprehend. Because in these accounts, the line between life and death is so tenuous, so fragile, that only something from above could intervene. And it is precisely at this point that the mystery becomes even greater. Fear mixes with shock, and shock mixes with gratitude. Tears flow, hearts ache, and amidst the confusion, a silent certainty takes hold. Someone from the spirit world was there. Someone cared, watched over, protected. Perhaps you, listening to this story now, feel the same chill. Perhaps you wonder, what if it were me? How many times do we rush through life, unaware that we are one step away from something irreversible? How many times do we believe we are alone, when, in fact, invisible forces walk alongside us? This man, like so many others, had not sought spiritual explanations before this episode. He was skeptical, pragmatic, and bound by the demands of everyday life. But after that moment, everything changed. He could no longer ignore the evidence that he had been saved by something that transcended logic. And perhaps this is the greatest revelation of these accounts. Life is not just what we see, what we touch, what we measure. There is an invisible world, closer than we imagine, that manifests itself in the moments we need it most. How many times have we heard stories like this and thought, this is just a coincidence? But in the face of pain, in the face of tragedy, coincidences don't bring comfort. What does is the realization that there is care, that there is love, that there is a greater purpose guiding every step we take. And the most touching thing is realizing that these voices, these warnings, don't just happen to special or chosen people. They can happen to anyone, to me, to you, to all of us. Because, as the Gospel according to Spiritism reminds us, God does not abandon any of his children, and the good spirits are sent by his providence to console and guide us. Reflecting on this elevator story, it's impossible not to think about how many times we've been spared something we never even saw. Perhaps without realizing it, we've been guided, warned, or protected. Perhaps that sudden sensation of changing course, of waiting a few more minutes, of going back on a decision, was, in fact, the same divine care that saved that man in that hallway. And it's precisely this awareness that transforms lives, because, after an experience like this, nothing is ever the same again. Fear of the unknown turns to reverence. Doubt gives way to faith. Loneliness dissolves in the certainty that we never walk alone. But if these stories already evoke chills and emotion, prepare yourself, because there are even stronger, more intense stories that reveal how the invisible can manifest itself not only to save, but also to profoundly transform the destiny of an entire life. And it is precisely when terror seems to dominate, when the heart beats faster, when breathing becomes shallow and thoughts become confused in the face of the fear of death, that the most beautiful twist appears, the discovery that we are never alone. Many of those who have experienced experiences like the elevator warning voices, inexplicable premonitions, signs that change their destinies have been deeply impacted. The first reaction, of course, was shock. How did this happen? What is that voice? Have I gone crazy? But once the shock had passed, a deeper question began to resonate. Who, after all, is looking after me? And it was in this search for answers that many discovered Spiritism. They discovered that these so-called warnings are not figments of imagination, nor mere coincidences. They are real manifestations of something much greater, the voice of our spiritual guides, known by many as guardian angels. The Gospel according to Spiritism teaches us clearly, The guardian angel is the spirit that guides you on the path of good, that sustains you in trials and consoles you in afflictions. Suddenly, what had previously seemed like mystery, superstition, or even delirium transformed into faith. The inexplicable made sense. Fear gave way to hope. Imagine the impact of such a revelation. A person previously skeptical, accustomed to relying solely on logic, is touched by something that defies all rational explanation. It's as if the veil of the invisible were lifted for a few moments, allowing us to see that life doesn't end in matter, that there is a network of constant care, invisible to the eye, but profoundly real. And it's not just about escaping death. The most striking thing about these stories is what comes afterward. Many of these survivors radically changed their lives. Some abandoned old addictions, alcohol, drugs, gambling, because they realized they had been given a second chance and didn't want to waste it. Others rediscovered their spirituality, resuming prayers they had forgotten years ago. There were those who rebuilt shattered families, those who reconciled with parents, siblings, and children because they understood that time is too short to waste on hurt and resentment. There were also those who, realizing that every minute is a gift, began to appreciate the simplest details. A child's smile, a friend's hug, the bird song in the morning. And all of this because they understood a powerful truth. They are not alone. They never were. Looking back, we realize these voices and signals don't just appear in extreme moments. How many times have we felt that sudden urge to change course, to wait a few more minutes, to say a kind word without knowing exactly why? Perhaps it's happened to you. A strange feeling of impending danger or unexpected comfort in the midst of pain. These small signs may be our spirit guide's subtle way of guiding us. They don't appear to impress or frighten us. They appear because they love us, because they have a mission to guide us toward goodness, protect us, and help us grow spiritually. And this is where life takes on new meaning. Because when we understand that there is constant divine care, the way we view difficulties changes. What was once seen as bad luck or punishment becomes a test, a necessary learning experience, a step on the path to evolution. This is the great power of spiritual transformation, transforming pain into faith, fear into courage, tragedy into opportunity. And that's why so many survivors claim they weren't just saved from an accident, but given a second life. One of them reported, "After hearing that voice that saved me, I could never be the same person again. I couldn't live on autopilot anymore. Every day, every gesture, every choice took on greater meaning. It was like being born again." And perhaps this is the message each of us needs to hear. Because you, who are now following these stories, may be wondering, do I also have a guardian angel? Have I already been saved and not even realized it? The answer, according to spirituality, is clear. Yes, we all do. We are all accompanied, supported, and guided. Perhaps you haven't heard such a clear voice yet, but you may have felt that inexplicable impulse that changed the course of an entire day. Perhaps you didn't realize it, but you've been protected in situations that could have ended differently. And it is precisely this awareness that transforms our relationship with life. Because when we understand that we do not walk alone, we begin to live with more confidence, more hope, more love. But get ready, because of so far we've talked about signs that save. Next you'll hear even more intense stories. Stories in which contact with the invisible not only changed the destiny, but revealed profound truths about the afterlife. In the end, they all understood that those voices weren't figments of their imagination. They weren't passing delusions or mere coincidences. They were real expressions of the invisible care that accompanies us every day. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson these stories teach us. We don't need to wait for danger to knock on the door to remember that we never walk alone. The presence of our spiritual guides isn't limited to moments of terror or near death. They are always there in every step of the way, in every tear that flows silently, in every smile that emerges after a prayer, in every night when a heavy heart finds unexplained relief. How many times have you felt that sudden urge to not do something, or to change your path? How many times have you found strength you didn't know you had, right when everything seemed to be falling apart? These are small, subtle, but powerful signs that there is someone by your side, caring, inspiring, and protecting you. And when life seems too hard, when the burden feels too heavy to bear, remember this truth. There is always a voice ready to whisper the path of hope in our hearts. This voice may not sound like audible words, but it manifests as intuition, as sudden peace, as unexpected courage to move forward. Pain, however intense, is not the end. On the contrary, it is merely the beginning of a new awareness. It is an invitation to look beyond matter, beyond the immediate, beyond what the eyes can see, because it is in the silence of pain that we can often hear more clearly the voices of the invisible. These experiences teach us that life is much bigger than we believe, that we are not cast at random, that there is a divine love sustaining every existence, and that, if we open our hearts, if we are willing to listen, we will realize that the invisible always speaks to us. And that's the true miracle, discovering that we're never alone, that even when we think we're adrift, someone holds the helm of our boat firmly, that even when we feel like we're falling, invisible hands reach out to lift us up. Perhaps this is the message you needed to hear today. Perhaps your life is going through moments of pain, uncertainty, and fear. Perhaps you feel abandoned, without the strength to carry on. If so, keep this in your heart. There is no void that spiritual love cannot fill. There is no night so dark that divine light cannot illuminate. There is no fall so deep that a guardian angel cannot help you rise. That's why these accounts aren't just moving stories. They're invitations. Invitations to believe more, to listen more, to make room in our lives for the spiritual. Invitations to trust, even without understanding everything. And here's the thought I want to leave you with. How many times in your life have you felt an invisible sign? It could have been a voice, a hunch, a dream, an intuition that changed the course of a day or even your entire life. Share in the comments. Has something like this ever happened to you? Have you ever felt like someone protected you in a moment of danger? Your experience can strengthen the faith of others who need hope today. And before I close, I want to make a special request. If this message touched your heart, if these stories gave you a new perspective on life, be sure to leave a like. It really helps spread this message of faith and hope. And of course, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, take this moment to click subscribe and activate the bell. Here, you'll always find stories that move, inspire, and connect you with what is most profound, the love that comes from above. Because together, we can form a chain of light, faith, and hope that transcends borders and reaches thousands of hearts. Remember, pain is not the end. It's just the beginning of a new awareness. And when we open ourselves to listening, we realize that the invisible always speaks to us. May this message be the voice that whispers in your heart today, you are not alone.